I have a lot of things, a laundry list of things that I can say that I have in criticism of the black church. So let me just go ahead and use this moment to get on my soapbox. Hey family, so I haven't done one of these in quite a bit of time, so I'm glad to be back. The shores somewhere over here. My name is Joseph Solomon. For those of you who are not familiar, yesterday, August 21st, actually marks 2 years that I made this big announcement after becoming and growing this audience of Christians as a singer, as a songwriter, as a poet, as a YouTuber, traveling around the country and the world, proclaiming the name of Jesus Christ. I decided that just wasn't for me anymore. And I've used this channel to sort of address the journey of that. And that's why it's called The Shore Somewhere Over Here, that I've implying some sort of shipwrecked faith on some shores somewhere and trying to figure out what that means for you as you journey on. And so particularly today, I want to talk about my experience specifically as a black Christian. And I want to address black American Christian culture. I'm doing this kind of off the dome. This is not some sort of video essay with a ton of research, more so introspective and just some thoughts to think about, the things that have been on my mind concerning that. And two main points that I really want to dig at, and I'm going to try to shove into one video. On one side, I want to discuss and think about my lament for what I believe has been and is and will be the decline and the loss of black American Christian culture. And then on the other side, what black American Christian culture means to someone, particularly a black person, who no longer considers themselves a Christian. And I think these things will be still a interesting topic to consider for people who are not black or American or Christian. If you're black in another country, or you're American and you've left Christianity, but you're not black, but either way, you have been submerged in a type of culture. Religion cannot be transported without the container of some type of culture. People try it. And I applaud people who do that, missionaries who've gone overseas, who've really, really tried. How can we transport the message of our Jesus Christ without despising the culture that we're going into and without bringing the cultural baggage that we assume is sort of in the gospel? How do we sort of parcel that out? And so I want to discuss those things, particularly from a black American Christian perspective. And what I mean by culture, when I say this, is the manifestation of human ideas in the real world in a collective group. And that manifestation looks like art forms and artwork and customs and traditions, style of dress, style of language and lingo and slang, understood cultural hierarchies, understood expectations of a person within a collective group of people. And there's a bunch of different subcultures. Obviously, cultures overlap because you could be a black American Christian in that culture, but also in the broader black American culture, but you're also in hip hop culture, and you're also in tech culture, and you're also in Southern black culture. And so there's a bunch of different overlaps. So I'm aware of that. But to give some background on my black American Christian perspective, and I just want to preface by saying that on one side, I do believe I had many very, what we would call typical black American Christian experiences growing up. I also know that there is no collection of experiences that somehow make you more or less black at the end of the day. You are black because you're black. You know, and so I acknowledge that that you are black by inherently black. You are just black, but at the same time, even though black experience is not a monolith, we do understand that there is quite a lot of similarities, not just in America, but even when I go to London and experience black culture in London and I experienced black culture in Africa, there are amazingly a lot of similarities, which is really cool, which is why I believe this video is still going to be interesting for those who may not have a specifically American experience within Christianity. And so I grew up, I think, in hindsight, a pretty interesting black experience. You know, I was raised in Texas, in the South, in a small town, but it was near a military base. So we weren't quite Texan. Everyone was from everywhere. Everyone was being stationed from New York and from California or from wherever in the country. And then we brought in this melting pot of cultures into this small town in Texas. And my church that I grew up in was technically non-denominational on paper because we didn't belong to some larger denomination. But in our theology, we were definitely, in our theology, in our experience, in our expression, definitely Pentecostal full gospel. That was the I believe the roots as I began to as I left the church and I got older and I went off to college and stuff and I started studying theology more and I'm lining up, well, where does my church really lean? And I really see the roots of it being in Pentecostalism and full gospel. My dad was raised Pentecostal. My dad and my parents are from Baltimore, but my pastor is from Philadelphia. And we're all in Texas having this very black Christian experience. And, you know, we had the shouting and the speaking in tongues and the running around in laps in the Holy Spirit. We had the praise dancers as well as the banner ministry. We had mimes. We had Sunday morning service and Sunday night service, which is not even really a thing too much anymore. You know, you have a little break during the day and then you could wear a suit that night, the same one that you wore that morning, or if your parents were cool, they let you wear jeans and tennis shoes at night as well. So that's the experience that I had growing up. We also had, you know, a very typical black church hierarchy where you basically had one person in charge. You had we had a pastor or a bishop who was in charge of everything, kind of led, and there was definitely some stacking of hierarchy as it went down, elders and deacons and counselors and so forth. But essentially, you had sort of the man of God in charge, and I think that is a very typical experience for a lot of people that I know across the country that were raised in black church. When I left my hometown, I actually sort of stepped away from Christianity for a while and then came around back to it. When I came back to it, I found myself really drawn to a more intellectual expression of Christianity, but not just more intellectual, because mind the words that I'm using when I'm talking about this, because they're still inherent. What's inherent is the sort of despising of black culture, that somehow this newfound theology that I ran across was somehow inherently more quote unquote intellectual. Scholarly, academic, sterile, even, yes, maybe more academic, but intellectually, I think I'd beg to differ that it was, in hindsight, I'd beg to differ that it was somehow intellectually superior. But that was what came with this culture. I think that because of YouTube and podcasting, we had a wave of this sort of modern uprising of Reformed, Calvinist, fundamental Christianity that swept across the country and really in many ways around the world, that presented itself as this sort of gospel-centered expression. It's all about Jesus, it's all about the grace of Jesus and gospel. And we saw it as something that was just transporting the raw, unadulterated, pure, I want the purest of it, right? If it's a drug, I want that thing to be pure. And we were being told that it was the more pure version, this more academic, this more gospel-centered version of Christianity. This was the purer version of it. And it was not coming with cultural baggage. But as I've said before, we know that is simply not the case. When you transport religion, it is at best difficult, at worst impossible to transport religion without some type of container that is a culture, that comes with cultural expectations, that come with quote unquote better or more sacred ways of worshiping God, of music, the style of music, or the way that you express yourself on a Sunday morning in church, the way that you dress, the way that you speak. All these things are cultural artifacts. And so when I've stumbled across this version of Christianity that definitely scratched my itch for more knowledge and a more intellectual experience with God, it definitely scratched that itch for that. When I came across it, it also tends to make you want to despise the culture that you came from. And so coming from a Black American Christian culture, I began to look back on that experience as primarily untruthful or negative. And I really wanted this more pure version of Christianity. And that lasted for like maybe a year or two before I started to realize just how inherently European in one way, because the Reformation really starts in Europe and it carries European preferences, but not just European, but specifically white American culture that obviously has direct ties to European culture, but nonetheless, white evangelical American culture is its own thing separate from a European type of Christianity. And the preferences that come with it, the style of worship, the style of instruments, the way that you dress, the way that you speak, all those things come into play and make you, question whether or not that Black Christian experience you had was a really truthful Christian experience. And so now, fast forwarding, once I began to appreciate more of my Black Christian upbringing, and in retrospect, in hindsight, all of that begins to, it always takes on a new light, a new color. And so now, not being a Christian at all anymore, and not subscribing to the Bible or to the way of Jesus, in at least not in any supernatural sense. And I'll talk about that in another video. I've kind of hinted at it before, but in any supernatural, mystical, or eternal saving sense, I don't subscribe to the way of Jesus or Christianity. And so it makes me consider my relationship to my childhood now. And one thing I want to say, and I remember I made a post about this on Threads. Former Black Christians, your childhood still belongs to you. You are a part of a great cultural tapestry. No one takes that. Church is not for you, but choirs and organs are still magical. You haven't opened a Bible in years, but there's that one line your old pastor said that rings true to this day. You may have church hurt, but the way Mother Jackson loved you and kissed your cheek is still a sweet memory. Glory to glory is still a motherfucking jam. I was bumping out to some Fred Hammond a few weeks ago, like, man, yo, this is glory to glory to glory to glory to glory to glory. It's just good music to God. And it evokes memories that I had in church listening to that music with the people that I was listening to it with. And I remember making a video when the Money Long song Hours and Hours got popular, and I remember Stevie Mackey and Amber Riley made their own version of it. And to me, I think they were going for a very R&B vibe on the piano, but to me it sounded like gospel. And so I made this like sort of parody of it. Yeah. He's here. Even now. So late in the midnight hours and hours, God's gonna turn it around. It's gonna work in your favor. Lobster and shrimp towers gonna work in your favor. And hours, and hours, and around, and around, and around, and around. I got some backlash from Christians who were like, well, didn't you leave Christianity? You can't be making fun of this if you left Christianity. it's kind of like, the outsider's now making the insider joke. You're not an insider anymore. You don't get to make this joke. And I got that comment quite a few times. And, I thought to myself, no. This is my culture. Black, we have to make the distinction. Yes, there is I don't want to make light of what people genuinely believe about their eternity and about their life and their soul and relationship to God and how that plays out with Jesus and so forth. But either way, there is your Christian faith, but there is also your Christian culture. I may not have the faith, I may not belong to the Christian faith anymore, but I'll never not be part of that Christian culture. That doesn't get removed from me. That's like saying, you was raised in New York, but you moved, so you can never make jokes about New York. It's like, well, I was raised in New York. Like, I'm from New York, so I get to say whatever I want because I own that. Just because I live in Florida now doesn't mean that New York culture doesn't belong to me, or wherever you were raised. It belongs to you. Whatever hometown I was raised in, I don't live there anymore, but I know that culture. What I was raised in, no one takes that from you. I am, in a cultural sense, I'm still very much Black Christian. I get the Black Christian references. I understand the culture of it. If you throw me in a Black church right now, I know how to maneuver in the same way of somebody who's from New York and they left for 10 years and they went back. They know, like, they're comfortable. Like, oh, I know I ain't been here in a minute, but I know how to maneuver. I feel at home. I feel at ease. Like, this is nothing to me, versus an outsider may feel weird. Like, oh, I don't know how to catch a train. I don't know the lingo. I don't know what's proper for me to do when I interact with certain people at certain times of the day. Like, I'm a fish out of water. But for me, I'm not a fish out of water when I go into a Black church, even if I don't agree with the ideologies that they may preach. And even if I feel uncomfortable because of the tension that I feel about what's being taught, and, I have my own grievances here. But as far as not knowing how to interact and not knowing what to expect, I know how to be in a Black church because I was raised in that. And that is my culture. It belongs to me. And it also belongs to me in the sense of I don't have to throw away the things that I've learned or the things that I appreciate about that. I want to encourage people who feel that tension of like, well, what do I do with the things that meant so much to me? Just because you moved away from it doesn't mean that you can't find meaning and joy and purpose in it. That I can still listen to gospel music and it can still move me. I still love choirs. I still love diminished chords and these type of chord progressions that move me in church that you can't find nowhere else. You can find hints of it because really, if we're being honest, Black American Christian culture, if I'm being honest, the world is culturally and artfully in debt to Black American Christian culture because it was out of Black American church that we got blues, and eventually we got jazz, and we got soul that evolves out of that. And of course we get hip hop, we get R&B, and all that is considered mainstream now is a result of a particular group of people in America that was ostracized from mainstream Christian culture, mainstream Christian art, and they made their own art forms, and it blew up into this thing. So it moves me still. It moves me still, and I love it, and I don't have to get rid of it. I can still enjoy it because it's just good music. It still moves me in that way. And I'm okay. We even listen to some Black preachers sometimes, some old videos from people that move me in a way. I'm like, man, she preaching. She's saying something good. I heard a snippet. I don't know if I agree with everything else she said in the sermon, but this part right here still rings true. That there are things, just because you don't agree with the totality of the message doesn't mean that everything you learned in church, and particularly Black church, was wrong. That there's still quotes that my mom sends me from my pastor who passed away a few years ago. She will send me quotes from his book sometimes, and I'm like, that's true. That's true. It's just a true thing to say. that there are truths in it. And I'm okay with that. Like, I don't have to hate the whole thing. Like, I don't have to get down with the entire eternal prospect of it, the eternal implications of it. But in a very truthful and practical sense, yes, I can get down with it. And I don't have to lose that part of my culture, part of my identity. That is part of the self, and that is part of my memories, and it's how I connect to myself and how I connect to people around me. And so that's one thing I want to say, is that Black American Christian culture is a culture, and it belongs to me. Victory is mine. Victory is mine. Victory today is mine. I told Satan, get thee behind. Victory today is mine. It's mine. You can't take it from me. I know that make you mad. I know it make you mad, doesn't it? Make you want to go like this. I don't care. It's mine. Can't take it from me. The second thing I want to say about Black American Christian culture, and maybe it needs to make a whole nother video about this. As you can see, I have an appreciation for Black American Christian culture, and I haven't really gone into the depths of it, but I do have an appreciation for what it has given to me and what it has given to Black people across the country, and it has given to people in general across the world. It has given so much to the world. I have an appreciation for it. I don't despise it. There are a lot of things, because I'm from the culture, I can critique it, and I feel no problems critiquing it. I have a lot of things, a laundry list of things that I can say that I have in criticism of the Black church, namely mimes. Let me just go ahead and use this moment to get on my soapbox about mimes. The one thing, this is how you know, I had a friend tell me this. I won't put his name out there, but he said, man, this is how you know mimes are bad. Is that white people have not tried to steal it. White people have tried to do everything that Black Christian church has done. But they are not fooling with mimes. That never quite made it out of the Black church. Hey, man, we can't do everything right. All right. You know what I'm saying? Black people, we did a lot of good stuff. We created blues, you know what I'm saying? Rock and roll, all that. We created a lot of, and sometimes, hey, players mess up, right? We can't do everything, right? We got to try some stuff. Some stuff works, some stuff don't. I don't know why it stuck around so much. I would love to know the origin of mimes in the church. I don't know when it came up. I feel like it hasn't been part of Black Christian culture like for a very long time. I feel like in the 90s it just came out of nowhere, and next thing you know, niggas was just painting their face white. We was walking around in white face. And it's not even like mime like we would think of like a Parisian mime, It's like we did our own thing. It's not even miming. It's like praise dancing, but with a blank face. I don't get it, and it's so bad. Most of the people who do it, I feel like it just takes very little talent to do. You just have the biggest talent is picking the right song, and as long as the person singing the song is killing it, the crowd is going to love it. You just got to do all the little stop motion stuff y'all be doing. Like, oh my gosh, it's one of the worst things. There's a lot of bad things that come out of the Black church. And one in particular, is definitely mimes. Goodness gracious. But with that, like I said, I love what Black American Christian culture represents, where it comes from. The civil rights movement does not happen without the Black church. It just doesn't happen. We were not able to mobilize as a large unified group of people without some sort of religious front. Of course, you have the Nation of Islam that has its own religious front as well, but it still uses religion. It was sort of a subsect of Black culture. It wasn't as broad as Black Christian culture. And so, not to minimize its effect on the civil rights movement and for equality for Black people in general, obviously Malcolm X, a towering figure in Black American history. But a lot of the Black leaders that we see at the forefront and behind the scenes in the civil rights movement and the push for equality for Black people across America, it is launched out of the Black church. Our first formations of Black banks come out of the formation of Black churches. So Black church really was the sort of launching site for the mobilization, the organization of Black people. I know there were many others who were not part of the Black church, who were also fighting for Black liberation. Not diminishing that at all, but I don't want to understate just how important the Black church was for that. And with that, we get this very unique version and this unique expression of Christianity. We have church mothers. I don't know why we don't have church fathers. I thought it was really interesting that, like, when you look at European history of the church, you hear about the church fathers. They always say the church fathers. We don't hear much about the church mothers when it comes to broad church history. But Black church history, we got mothers. We got Mother Jackson, Mother Harris, Mother Bell, we got mothers. Okay, there was a highlighting of the importance of women in the church, even if there was some diminishing of women in the church. So I don't want to act like, I don't want to, rewrite history. But I still think, even with the misogyny and patriarchy that is inherent within Black Christian culture, it's not to say that there was also some elements that were very countercultural. The elevation of Black women in the church, of Black speakers, of Black pastors, of Black preachers, and Black, particularly women in the church. And so we get church mothers. We have a specific style of gospel. We have a particular way of dressing, the way we styled our clothes, the way we dance. Even a shout is a particular type of dance that is known across Black American Christian culture. It's kind of crazy that no matter where you go, a shout is a shout, and you add your own little flavor to it, but there's still, just like any sort of mainstream dance, you venture out, you add your own flavor to it, but the main thing, the main vibe is still, you know what I'm saying? It's got a look to it. And so I don't want to go, I'm trying to make this short. What I want to say is that I fear that for two big reasons, what is known as traditional Black American Christian culture is being sort of blurred away. I could be wrong, because this is somebody, in some sense, I am an outsider because I haven't been in Black Christian church in a while. I haven't been really had my ear to the streets like that. But even when I was in the church, I began to notice that, like, the way that we were raised in church is not the way that we're doing church now. And I think that's a lot of good things. There's a lot of bondages that just don't need to happen anymore. But I think also, man, are we still going to have church mothers? Are we still going to have a particular brand of Black music that is Black? Because what has happened is a sort of homogenization of Black American Christian culture over the years, where you had Black people who were moving into white mainstream culture, these big worship groups, these worship collectives that we see that they're very Black, but they bring Black style to white format. So the format of church is very different than traditional Black church. The format of their songs and the way they're written are very different than Black church, but they've got some of the flair and the ad libs and stylization of Black church. But I do wonder what is going to happen to, is it going to get kind of lost to it, and we start to slowly, because what has happened is really we just have CCM songs, contemporary Christian songs, that have Black people singing them, that have a sort of Black flavor to them, but they're still made for the consumption of mainstream culture, versus there was a time when Black music, Fred Hammond and Kirk Franklin, these type of people, they were making songs for the Black church, versus now it's like, well, we want this blending, and I think a lot of Christians say that's a good thing. We want to see the blending, and we want to see the crossing over, and I think it's great. I think the crossing over is great, but what happens to the preservation of a particular culture? Does it get blended into the larger mainstream culture? So on one side, I think there's a homogenization that's happening, but I also think there's an exodus out of the church in general. Black Christians and Christians in general just leaving the church. What replaces that? That's something I'm experiencing right now as someone who's no longer a Christian. I think through myself, like, man, how do you make community? I was so used to making community in the church, and I had a ritual of church. And where does that go? A lot of the ways that we see Black Christian culture now is more nostalgic. Like even shouting it's almost like a cult. It's not, when we see people do it, it's more of a, even if it's not a joke, some people do it as a joke, but even people who don't do it as a joke, it still feels more like a relic than it does something that is of the present time. It seems like somebody who's still holding on. It's kind of like vinyl records. Like, we got Spotify, but I just do this for the relic of it. Like, I just do this just because it's nostalgic. And I wonder when the nostalgia wears off, if it wears off, not saying it will, but if the nostalgia wears off, where does Black Christian culture go? Not only for Black people who consider themselves still Christian, but particularly for people who are no longer Christian as they exodus out of the church. What does that look like? How do we galvanize together culturally? I think that's that could be some of the distinction as well, the sort of discrepancy that we see when we're trying to get Black people on board as a unit together for equal rights and just for our expression in the world in general. We have a lot of collectives, and I think are great. A lot of organizations and so forth. I also know that the church played a big role in that, but a lot of Christians have seen, just how hurtful the church has been to the progress of Black people as well. And what am I trying to say? I think I'm going to miss Black culture at some point, like particularly Black American Christian culture. And I'm wondering where it's going to go in the future. What does it look like? What does Black American Christian culture look like in 10 to 15 years? How does it stay preserved? For people who were born in the 2010s and 2020s, like, I think for me, I wasn't raised on older, the Clark sisters or Shirley Caesar and all that, older versions of gospel, but gospel was still going on. There were still iterations of it. And I don't know if there are young iterations of it. I think there's still older people who still doing it. Some people came in the tail end of it. There's still older people who are making gospel music. But are there are there 20-year-olds making gospel music in a very popular format? I don't know. I don't think so. Not that I'm aware of. And are there 20-year-olds who are deeply interested in Black American Christian culture and in participating in it in a very genuine, thorough way? And then what does that look like? How is it redeemed for people? Is there some new version of that for people who no longer subscribe to the supernatural or eternal tenets of Christianity, but still want to participate in a type of culture that is unifying for people who appreciate Black American Christian culture? I don't know. That's what I'm interested in. I think about myself as, I start a family, have a wife and kids, and it's like, where do we go for sanctuary? What is that sanctuary? What are the songs that we sing with other people that we all know? The ritualistic and religious songs that speak to the truths that we hold in our hearts that are not necessarily Christian, but feel very Black and feel very true to us. I don't know. I don't know. And that's something I want to post. So this is not necessarily a statement. Some of it is statements and some of it is curiosity of what's going to happen with Black American Christian culture. And I would love to know what you think about that. Leave it in the comment section. Like, what are your thoughts? What do you anticipate to see as as a distinct expression of Black American Christian culture? Where do you see it existing for people who still are going to be Christian and for people who are no longer Christian but want to appreciate it? So